Gentlemen, please welcome the co-founder and CEO of Airbnb, Mr. Brian Chesky.
All right, well, thank you guys for sitting and hearing what I have to say today. So I figured what I'd do is take us back to October 2007 and kind of take you from there till today and tell you kind of where I think the industry's going. So October 2007, I had just moved up from Los Angeles, and I was in San Francisco with my roommate, Joe, who I went to Rhode Island School of Design with. And Joe had been trying to convince me to move up to San Francisco for a couple years. I finally get up there, and I pack everything in the backseat of my old Honda Civic. I have $1,000 at the bank, and I get up there in like the middle of a Tuesday night, and Joe tells me the rent is $1,150, and I have $1,000 at the bank. So I realize I have a problem. I got to make rent. Well, it turns out this international design conference was coming to San Francisco. All the hotels in the city were sold out, so we had this idea. Well, what if we turned our home into a bed and breakfast? Unfortunately, I didn't have any beds, but Joe, he had some air beds. I have no idea why, but he did. He pulls the 3 air beds out of his closet, and we called it the Air Bed and Breakfast. So a lot of people ask, like, why are you called that name? Well, that's why. We ended up hosting 3 people from around the world that weekend, and everything about my experience, we started as a utility. We started as a way just to make money. But I ended up remembering we ended up hosting 3 people, a 45-year-old father of 5 from Utah, a 30-year-old from India, a 35-year-old woman from Boston. It was like we got to travel out ever leaving our living room. I mean, had enough money to make our rent, and at that point, I turned to Joe. As they're leaving, we thought to ourselves, well, what if there's a bigger idea here? What if there's other people like us, people that have a little extra space, they want to make a little extra money, and they want to meet people? I thought that sounded like a lot of people like Joe and I. We were pretty ordinary guys. So I said, Joe, who's the best engineer you know? He said his old roommate, Nate, is. Nate went to Harvard. He's a CS grad. And the 3 of us got together, and we built what you see today. Our original vision was, what if you could book somebody's home anywhere in the world the way you could book a hotel? And we end up launching for the Democratic National Convention, and we provided housing in Denver for the DNC. All the hotels, once again, were sold out. Obama moved from a 20,000-seat arena to an 80,000-seat football stadium. And, all these 24/7 news channels were like, where will they stay? So we had this idea, well, they'll stay in Airbnb. That's when we launched. This was exactly 4 years ago. And I remember at that time, we had about 100 people visiting our website every day. Back in the fall of 2008, no one was interested in this concept. They thought it was totally crazy. Maybe you guys in the audience think it's crazy. I'm used to that reaction, so don't worry. I remember telling my mom about this idea. She thought I was out of my mind. The biggest fear of a parent is when their kid goes to art school, they'll ever get a job. And this was pretty much her validation that, yeah, that art school thing didn't work out if you're renting your apartment to strangers. You're out of your mind. Of course, my late grandfather said, of course. This is how people used to travel when I was a kid. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And then I realized, well, actually, we didn't really invent this idea of staying in other people's homes. It actually seems kind of normal. People like homes. That's why they live in homes. That's not a big surprise. Well, since then, we've been growing, and we never knew how big this thing would be. The economic crisis of 2008 meant that people started adopting it. 2009, we started hiring people. April 2009, we took our first venture round from Sequoia Capital. At that time, we had no idea if more than 1,000 people would ever use this, but we had this idea that maybe we'd solve this problem. I remember during a program I was in, Y Combinator, I had an advisor, Paul Graham. He had this mantra that's really taught me about how to run a business. He said, make something people want. And the best way to make something people want is to find 100 customers that love you. By the way, that's really hard to find 100 people that actually love you. Most people don't have 100 people that actually love them. That's really hard. And he said it used to say it was better to have 100 people love you than 1 million people that sort of like you. It's kind of like a well. You can build this well of love, or you can build this really shallow pool, this utility people kind of care about, kind of don't. If you have 1 million people that kind of are apathetic about you, it's going to be really hard to get them to care. But it's actually not hard to find 100 people and have them really love you as a company. Joe and I in the 2009, we used to go door to door in New York City, meeting all of these hosts, these people renting homes on our apartment. We even offered free professional photography. We'd photograph all the homes for free, except we'd had no money. So Joe and I were the free professional photographers. I'd get a camera from my friend, bring it on the plane, I'd go door to door, staying in people's homes. When you buy an iPhone, Steve Jobs never came and slept on your couch, but I did. That was my user acquisition strategy. I just stayed in everyone's homes. I gave them reviews. Then our friends, they gave reviews. And they're right. In 2010, I literally lived on the website. You know, the best way to make a product that people love is to make a product for yourself. We have a saying at Airbnb, the best marketing is investing in the user experience. And then your users will market for you. You know, at RISD, I had a teacher who used to say advertising is the price you pay for being unoriginal. I don't know if I believe that, but I will tell you that you can build something. We always can build something that people love so much that they will tell everyone else they know about it. Today, we've grown pretty quickly, as you've seen. We have over 250,000 homes on our website active right now, over 500,000 that have ever been listed on our website. We're in 30,000 cities in 190 countries. On a typical night, we have over 60 to 70,000 people sleeping in a home on our website. By New Year's Eve in New York City alone, 10,000 people will be sleeping in New York on Airbnb, just New York City, and that's just by New Year's Eve. Company is growing quite quickly, and I think it really comes back to this idea, make something people want. In fact, in our business, I think many times we've made something people need. Over 50% of our hosts on our website depend on Airbnb to pay their rent or their mortgage. 50%. 90% of people on Airbnb rent the homes they live in. So they rent the homes they live in when they're not there, or they rent an extra bedroom. I want to leave this to my second point, and that is that I think travel is changing completely. I think it's changing even more than most people are saying it's going to change. Because I actually think that travel is going to go away as we know about it. And in its place, people will not travel in the future. They just won't travel. They'll be mobile. It's a completely different thing. This idea that we will travel on business, which is 35% of hotel revenue, or we will like go on a 2-week vacation every year, that is being replaced by this idea that you have the computing power of the NASA space station control room in 1960 in your pocket, these smartphones. You can do your job anywhere around the world. Over 10% of our revenue comes from stays that are longer than 30 days. People are much more mobile now than they ever were. We have micro-entrepreneurs, traveling on business, these corporate credit cards. Well, it turns out there's a huge percentage of people that are now consultants, entrepreneurs, micro-entrepreneurs. All these people need places to stay. A huge percent of our money are people that are visiting families. And in many of these countries, especially in Russia, Brazil, and other countries, visiting your family is a really, really big use case. We think travel is changing completely. In fact, I think that travel is like the next version of the social network. Think about it this way. On Airbnb, we allow you to discover what's inspiring about every person, every place, and every neighborhood in the real world. In the last 15 years, it's all about been accessing all of this over the internet. You're behind a laptop, and you're in Wikipedia reading about these neighborhoods. You're trying to figure out where to go. You're connecting all these people on Facebook, digitally. When you actually create the physical manifestation of that, actually connecting in the real world and making friends in the real world, that's travel. That's what travel is going to mean. So I think this idea of social is changing completely. Social isn't adding a like button to your website. Social is not about integrating with Facebook. Social is what's after Facebook. Social is Facebook in the real world. It's completely different. And I think this is going to change travel completely. The other thing I think is going to change travel, and you guys have talked about this, is mobile. Mobile is going to completely change travel. SEO has been a pretty important channel for most people in the travel industry. You know what percent of traffic we get from SEO? It's about 2%. I'm actually not proud of that. I think we could have done a better job with SEO. But it is about 2%. We do not grow through Google search. Even Google advertising isn't an important channel for us at all. I think the last 10 years, travel's been dominated by Google search. Google search has completely dominated travel. In the next 10 years, Google search will not dominate travel. It just won't. Ask Google if they think mobile web search will dominate the internet. Even Google will tell you it won't. Mobile will eclipse web, and the application economy is going to be completely different. People are going to discover the apps they love. So I think this shift is going to mean that SEO and search engine marketing will always be relevant, but they'll just be one channel. And now mobile, this is not like the end of mobile. This is actually the beginning of mobile. This is just the beginning. This shift is going to completely overtake. In the next few months, I think it's by like April, Facebook's expecting that mobile will eclipse web. Think about that. It's going to actually eclipse web. The other reason I think mobile is changing completely is for us on the supply side, our homes. One of the reasons that people love staying in hotels is they have up-to-date inventory. The calendar says it's available. You can click it. You can book it. It's available. Before us, you had sites like Craigslist. You had to message 20, 30 people. It'd take a day for all of them to get back to you. It was a really inefficient marketplace. What happens when every host has a calendar in their pocket with up-to-date inventory when they can respond to a request from a customer as fast as a hotel? The friction of booking will go down dramatically. Basically, you'll have these huge infrastructures that won't be as necessary, and people will be able to connect together in person. And by the way, us in travel, we're just one tiny little sector of this huge sharing economy. We're seeing this with cars. We're seeing how people are changing the way they work. We're seeing this in category after category. You see, the last 15 years, the internet has disrupted content. Think about movies. The movie industry's been turned on its head. The music industry's been turned on its head. Newspaper industry's been turned on its head. That's all content. So what's going to actually change in the future? Things in the real world. And it's not just us. We're actually a very tiny percentage of what I think is going to change in the real world in the next 15 years. So I'll end today just a few thoughts about where I think travel is actually going. A few things I think are happening. The first is people are just more mobile. They're moving more. And, one of the huge surprises in our business were this idea of sublets. People actually want to stay for longer than 30 days. Why? I don't think in the future people will have one-year leases. Think about if you have a landlord and you give him a rent check every month and you have like a one-year lease you have to sign. That's actually an incredibly inefficient marketplace. That lease is an enormous amount of friction that can be disintermediated completely with a frictionless economic environment. So I think in the future, people are going to stay wherever they need for a night, a week, a month, 2 months, 4 months, 6 months. It's going to change completely. The second thing is ownership. People will just own less things in the future. They will just own fewer things in the future. We're starting to see this, but it's actually going to change completely, I think. In the future, this is how simple it will be. In the future, you'll own whatever you want responsibility for. You own it, all right, you're responsible for it. That's it. And so it's not that people won't own things in the future, they will, but they'll just own what they want to be responsible for. But this romanticism around ownership, the American dream about having a car, having a home, that's all going away. The romanticism around ownership is going to be replaced with the actually practical realities of I want to own this because I want to be responsible for it. The next thing that's going to change is there's going to be a proliferation of millions of micro entrepreneurs around the world. This is something that as I talk to the White House, to 10 Downing Street, to mayors around the country, this is very clear that this is something that everyone's interested in. This proliferation of micro entrepreneurs. The unemployment rate in Spain for people under 30, it's like almost 50%. It's actually crazy, right? So how would a country like Spain or Greece actually increase their economic development in that country? They have all these unemployed people in this country that can't get work. Well, it turns out there's still millions of people that want to go to Spain. And there's millions of people that still want to go to Greece. And you have millions of unemployed people that have extra time on their hands. So actually, there's a marketplace for that, isn't there? People that maybe have extra space, but not only just us. We've seen some companies that have talked about, like these tour guide businesses, ordinary people being tour guides. That's not a niche business. Not when you have a country of millions of people unemployed who have extra time in their hand, and you have millions of people that want to, for the first time, discover that location like a local. Now you're going to have millions of entrepreneurs, micro-entrepreneurs, that can provide hospitality and tourism all over the world. So that, I think, is one of the other things that's going to completely change this marketplace. You see, I think that travel, this is incredibly, incredibly exciting. It doesn't mean that people are going to come and disrupt anyone here. It means that actually it's an opportunity for all of us to think completely different. If there's one message today, it's that what happens today in travel will not happen in 5 years at all. It's going to be completely different. But it's up to the people with the inventory, the people with the scale, that are in the biggest position to actually change that world. I think it's up to everyone in this audience to actually help move this world forward into this brave new world where travel is completely different. You know, this idea of exporting an American experience all over the world is not what the traveling public was going to want, we don't think, in the next 20 years. We think they're going to want to explore and experience these neighborhoods, these people, these homes, these environments all over the world that they never otherwise knew existed. I think that's actually really, really inspiring. And I think that the work we're seeing now is like what you guys are doing, different airlines, different travel companies, just connecting. It's really, really interesting. So, you know, to end my talk today, I would summarize it by saying this. Airbnb, we started to solve our own problem. I never wanted to like come up and be on this stage and be talking to people about where I thought the future of travel was going to be. I wanted to make rent. That's it. Turns out my story is like the story of millions of people that are on my website every single day. They just wanted to make rent. They wanted to get by. They didn't fit in the current market system. We had hundreds of thousands of people on our platform who would have otherwise lost their homes to foreclosure. People who probably have $100,000 in like student loan debt, but they couldn't get a job in their environment, and they've turned away from that market system. And they've come to this other market system, this peer-to-peer economy that's built around the idea of sharing. I think this is only the beginnings of collaborative consumption. This is only the beginnings of the sharing economy. It's about giving power back to the people. That's a really interesting idea. So I think I have a minute left, so I'll summarize by saying this. You know, I hope in the future, Airbnb is a company that provides incredibly memorable experiences all over the world. And I also believe that for us to win, nobody has to lose. I heard that there was this stupid thing on the screen that had Brian Chesky versus Brian Sherples. I think that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen, I'll be honest. This idea that there has to be a battle between us and HomeAway, there has to be a battle between us and the hotel industry, is absurd. It's not about us versus anybody else. The battle is us against the economic environment that's changing so fast that we just have to adapt. I mean, I'm even nervous about it. I think we're the new kid in town, and yet there's tiny startups that are doing things completely different than we're doing. So I think this world is changing so quickly, but I think it's incredibly inspiring. I would definitely pay attention to a lot of the young startups, and I think this is going to be the beginnings. I hope 5 years from now we come back here and we look at an environment that's so different, but it's actually much bigger. I think the travel industry is going to be much bigger than it is today. It's not a zero-sum game, because I think this industry, which is $1 trillion industry, is one of the most undervalued industries in the world. In the future, more people want to travel. In the future, more people want to connect. Hotels are reaching record occupancy even as we are growing really fast. For us to win, everyone else can win, because the travel industry ultimately is being undervalued. It's not what we thought it was. It's about being mobile. It's how people will live in the future. So I guess I'm done now. So we have this talk back, right? All right, sorry.
Brian, thank you very much. Yeah, Brian, have a seat at the desk. Thank you. Thank you very much. That was great. So let's bring on our talkbackers. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Simon Lehman, CEO, Interhome. And Mr. Brian Sharples, co-founder and CEO, HomeAway.
Good man, you killed it. Hi.
Hey, Brian.
We on? How you doing? Hey, so Brian, one of the first things I want to ask you, that was a great presentation, by the way. And actually, I wanted to make a statement first, which is, it's incredibly impressive what this guy has done, because so many of us in the room, including HomeAway, have taken existing industries in the travel market and really worked to make them more efficient. But what's really fascinating about Airbnb is this is that Brian really created a market that didn't exist at all out of nothing. I mean, he created a brand new travel market that 4 years ago nobody could have envisioned. And I think, secondary to that, really created a new category of collaborative consumption, where there's been a lot of talk about it, but you've really built a business around it. And one of the things that I've always wanted to ask you and never really had a chance is there's been lots of press over the years where you've talked about Airbnb as a collaborative consumption company, and you've talked at times about, well, maybe someday we'll get into cars and office spaces and all kinds of things that can be shared. But, now here you are at the biggest travel, conference in the world. And I remember when HomeAway got started, we thought we were a marketplace business and we might get into other things. And I didn't even come to this conference for the first 3 years. But then we figured out, we're really a travel company. So my first question for you is just, and it's not really a business strategy question, it's more just like a, gut feel in your heart of hearts. If you think 20 years from now and you look back on the business, do you think you're going to be remembered more for being in a collaborative consumption business or a travel company?
It's a really good question. I've actually wrestled with this myself. I've gone back and forth in my own mind about, are we a travel company or are we a sharing economy company, collaborative consumption company? Where I've netted out on is this. I think ultimately, I love travel. The only thing about travel I don't like is I think when we say travel, I actually think we're undervaluing travel. Because I think when we think of travel, we try to put it in this box of every company in this room, not imagining every company in this room won't have to fight. It's not like half of you have to win for other half of you to have to die. I think everyone here can be much bigger. I think the travel industry is a trillion-dollar industry. It can be a multi-trillion-dollar industry. I think that we are, in a broad sense, a travel company. But with the caveat that I just don't love the associations people put into travel, because then they start trying to bucket us and try to say, well, you're now going to compete with all these other companies. I just think it's a different kind of thing. It's about being mobile. So, this is the really simple way to explain what we're going to do. When we created Airbnb, we were trying to figure out who we were in our soul. And we ended up realizing that what we're in the business of doing is creating memorable experiences around the world for people, connecting people from one part of the world to people in some other part of the world. And we ended up creating this storyboard. We called it Snow White because it was inspired by the movie when they created the storyboard. They created it for Snow White. And we did a storyboard, and we looked at every single frame of the experience. We said, how could sharing make every part of the travel experience better? How do you get picked up from the airport? What do you do when you're in your listing? What do you do when you're out and about in the town? I think there's many ways for us to design every one of those frames. But I think that we are ultimately in that business. I think great companies are really, really focused, but they go deep in one thing, and they try to design to end an experience. I've always admired Apple, and they've made very few products, but they create an ecosystem, and they went end to end. I think that's what we're going to do. I don't think you're going to come on Airbnb to get your neighbor's power drill.
Excellent. Well, Brian, first of all, congratulations on what you achieved in a very short period of time. From my side, representing the European largest vacation rental company, we're a property management business. We have a different angle in how we run our business and what we do and whatever, and obviously we've been looking at you very closely. And one of the issues that you have mentioned during your presentation is that you said 50% of people who use Airbnb are doing that to subsidize their rental income or to buy their loans, etc. Now, one thing that we see as a huge issue and coming stronger also in our business is that you've put in a new industry, a new space, and it's raising issues that before in the vacation rental business we were always under the radar. Yep. Especially in the cities now. And one point that I'm interested to hear is that, do you know how many of these 50% who do that with Airbnb are not actually allowed to sublet their places?
So I think to start of that question, I'll say this. I remember one time talking to your co-founder, Caro, and he said the vacation rental industry was like the world's largest industry no one ever heard of before. It's not, of course, everyone here has heard about it, but you don't see about it on NBC Nightly News all the time talking about this industry that actually happens to be much larger than the Hollywood film industry. I think what we've done is created a new market. We aren't making a marketplace more efficient. We're taking what never existed, what assets people already had, and we're creating something from that. When you do that, there's going to be a lot of questions. We're in 30,000 cities. And in some of these cities, it's completely clear and it's completely fine. And in some of these cities, there's many activities that are very clear and very fine, and there are activities that aren't fine. And there are some cities where they have just straight up prohibitions on this kind of activity. So this is our approach. We only want to operate in cities where the cities want us. If a city doesn't want us to be there, I don't want to be there. I want them to want us there. And so I said, instead of trying to be under the radar, especially if we're a transaction-based business, I want to go right to all the local officials, and I want to talk to them about what we're doing, and ultimately work with them, and say that for us to win, you don't have to lose. This is what we're doing. This is what the law says. It's either clear, it's either unclear, but this is who we are. Do you have a problem with this business or not? So where have I done this? We went to Paris, and I met with the mayor of Paris. And we met with President Sarkozy last year, and we met with a number of people. I was in 10 Downing Street. We were at the White House. We've been in the White House numerous times. We've worked with Mayor Bloomberg. Actually, you've seen recently.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but when you say you go to Paris and speak to the mayor, I can speak to the mayor in Paris as well. But what answer?
So we are in ongoing dialogue. First of all, the city of Paris has said that people renting primary dwellings, they don't have a problem. That's 92% of our business are people renting the homes they live in. The controversy around vacation rentals, typically, there's usually two controversies. One is local tax. The other is eating up local housing for people that live in that city. 92% of people on Airbnb rent out the homes they already live in. They're not eating up this inventory for people that would otherwise live there. They actually live there. And by definition, they need Airbnb. So actually, you could argue that's actually really good for local tenants. On the hotel tax side, which is another elephant in the room, Airbnb is not, we're not here to not pay taxes and not shy away from taxes. We actually 1099 every single person on our website. Everyone declares their income. This is not a money under the
money
table.
laundering.
Yeah, no, it's not. I mean, everything is declared. We issue W-8-BEN, or we 1099 everyone. And as far as a local tax, where we have to comply with cities, we're in dialogue with cities to show how do we either remit the tax or help our host remit the tax. And in some cities, you have to remit it. Some cities, your host has to remit it. And some cities, you don't have to remit it. So what is our plan? Our plan is to actually talk to these cities to figure out how to do it. We're in 30,000 cities, and so it takes a while to actually be able to do that. But we're not here to be under the radar. We're here to actually be in ongoing dialogue with cities and say, what are you okay with? What aren't you okay with? And it's typically those two issues.
Brian, can I just shift a little bit to the business side of the equation? You were talking earlier about the importance of getting people to love you, and I know you guys have really focused on design and the product, and you have lots of people that really love you. But, of course, what I learned is you get bigger and bigger, you got to make sure that your investors love you as well, right?
Exactly.
So there's got to be a business case behind that, and you've got some big-time venture guys behind the company. And you guys are pretty good at sort of, keeping a lot of information under wraps, but you do talk about, growth in room nights and growth in supply and things like that. But I never hear really any talk about, profitability or cash flow or something like that. And I look at the business, and one of the handicaps, it seems, is that the average room prices are actually pretty low. And as we know, any bookings-based business, whether it's hotel or vacation rentals or yours, is a pretty service-intensive business as well. So I'm just curious how that piece of it's going. How is the march towards profitability, or how do you look at it? Is it something you're just not focused on today?
That's a really good question. Profitability, to be profitable or not to be profitable.
No, you have to be at some point.
Yes. Right now is the question.
Or when.
Yeah. So the answer to that is simple, actually. We want to build the foundation to be a long-term, incredibly profitable company. And we'd be profitable today if, we're not profitable today, but we would be if we weren't interested in investing very heavily in new markets. So right now we're investing in Asia very heavily. I just came from Tokyo. I came from Sydney, Kuala Lumpur, Bangkok, Singapore, and Jakarta. So we're all over Asia right now. We're really looking to continue to do international expansion. But I do expect this company to be profitable. From last July when we raised that large round, we basically were at a fork in the road. We said we can do one of two things. We can basically continue to run this company. We were basically at a near break even. We continue to run that. Or we can invest really heavily in trying to get more market share and try to create a global network. For me, I like to think about how profitable we'd be in 5 years. And to be extremely profitable in 5 years, you have to build a network in cities all over the world. We're a primarily international business. Almost all of our business is cross-border. About 65% of our business is cross-border. And to point out though, what might be perceived as a low transaction volume or low ticket price items, the average stay in Airbnb is close to a week. So it's not like that small. And if you actually look at the average room night, we don't disclose that number, but it's all the numbers reporting it's like this really low number. It's much higher than that. I mean, we have many reservations that are thousands of dollars and more.
And so the customer service cost as a percentage of that revenue isn't something on a unit
It's not
basis
unusual.
that's
I mean, I look at
overwhelming.
what many other comrades have as far as like cost of marketing. We have a much lower cost of marketing. We basically don't acquire any customers unless it's very strategic. 96% of our returning customers are unpaid. 96%, maybe 97%. So we have like 3% that we might acquire to like get a market going. Right. We don't rely on SEO. We really don't rely too much on Google AdWords. Where we do rely on Google AdWords is in a new market where we're trying to get it to a critical mass because no one's ever done this before. Customer support is a little bit more in our business than other businesses, but the economics are actually pretty good.
Now, let's go there. Nobody's done that before. So you've just entered a new space. You put a new industry out there, and the new industry that you're creating always attracts copycats.
Yep.
There's tons of copycats,
yep.
especially in Central Europe, where I'm from, like yep. Wimdu and Nine Flats and House Trip, et cetera, et cetera. What makes you different, and what protects you from the copycats? Because from a business model point of view, it's not something totally sensational. You can copy that very easy.
Yeah.
So how do you protect yourself from the new entrances in the market? Because there's a lot of cash in that business right now. I mean, House Trip is raising funds. Wimdu has strong investors behind them, and they all want to have a piece of that pie. And how do you keep them out?
Yeah. So we had one clone, Wimdu, started by Oliver Samwer. Some of you might know who that is. You can imagine the phone call I got. It was, I think, March of 2011, and I got a call from some guy with a very strong German accent telling me that he built the fastest growing company in the world, Groupon, at that time valued at like $10 billion, and now we had like 40 employees. And he's like, he tells me, I just raised $90 million, I opened 40 offices, and I have 400 employees. I have 40, and he's basically like, we're coming after you. You can imagine what I thought. I was like the entrepreneur's worst nightmare. I'm like, why me? What the hell? And I was really concerned. I thought maybe we would win, but I didn't know, actually. I wasn't certain we were going to win, that's for sure. And I netted out, I had this thesis. I said, they are a community of mercenaries. We are a community of missionaries. People on our site love it. And I saw, when you have a war, missionaries usually beat mercenaries. I didn't actually know if that would happen, but that was my bet. At least that's what I told the company. I said, they have an army of 400 salespeople. We have a community of tens of thousands of missionaries who do this not because they're paid, but because they love it. I think we'll win. I didn't know. And we ended up, we're now like obviously much larger than Wimdu. We're about 30 times larger. Nine Flats, not that large. I think House Trip's doing well, but House Trip's more into vacation rentals. They're not really in cities. Most of those people on House Trip are not renting primary dwellings. That's what we do. I mean, like, House Trip is more of a competitor in HomeAway than we are, as far as I'm concerned, because they're going after the same inventory. We're not. And so I think the way you win is providing experience people love. I actually thought the best revenge against an internet clone is just to make them raise the company long term. It's like, you had that child, now you have to raise that child.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Brian Chesky, Mr. Brian Sharples, and Simon Lehman. Thank you very much.